I am joined today by Carter Page, who is the managing partner of Global Energy Capital, former foreign policy advisor to then candidate, now President Donald Trump, and also a central figure in the Trump-Russia investigation. He's mentioned a number of times by name in this now infamous Christopher Steele dossier, which we will get to. First of all, thank you so much for joining us, Carter.
No, nice to speak with you, David. Just one brief little correction. I was a member of the Trump campaign's foreign policy advisory committee. I was a volunteer on that for a while. I actually never had any direct relationship with then candidate Donald Trump, and I've never spoken with him. But
certainly,
just a minor clarification.
No doubt. So, I mean, how did you? I guess that's a good place to start. How did you end up? Even as part of that group that was offering that advice on a volunteer basis?
You know, I've been involved in a lot of foreign policy debates and projects throughout my life. I was, I've been a fellow at various think tanks. Spent several years at the Center for National Policy in Washington. So, I knew that obviously he was a candidate, and I believed that a lot of the things he was talking about in a foreign policy context made a lot of sense. And so, I knew some people that had contacts with him, so I went ahead and I volunteered in late 2015, early 2016.
So you were, in other words, you identified aspects of his platform that appealed to you when it comes to foreign policy. And so nobody reached out to you. You sort of made the first step and reached out through intermediaries to the Trump campaign.
Yes. Yep. That's right.
And what?
I've been into. I was actually a member of the New York delegation for. Then, Senator McCain when he was a candidate in 2008. So I was out in the convention in Minnesota. So, I knew various contacts through that, in terms of Republican circles. That was, some similar stuff which I had done in the past.
And even though it was on a volunteer basis in the sense that you weren't paid, not everybody who wanted to volunteer to advise on foreign policy was welcomed, right? So there was some reciprocity there. There was a certain point at which the campaign said, okay, we're putting together this group. It's a volunteer group. But the idea that anybody who wanted to volunteer would be part of that group, you're certainly not saying that. You were part of an established group.
Well, the term of reciprocity is, I think it relates to mutual benefit, right? I mean, I was just a volunteer, and the main benefit, it was like a charity for me, right?
You saw it as charity work
to
advise the Trump organization.
Yeah, it's not the Trump organization. Again, there was
the campaign. I apologize. Yeah,
a campaign. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So let's talk about the foreign policy elements of Trump's platform that appealed to you, that made you say, this is somebody I would want to advise on foreign policy. What was it that he was saying, particularly at that point in the campaign, that so appealed to you, that it motivated you to get in touch and say, here's where I want to volunteer?
I think it continued to solidify over time. And the one speech I would refer you back to was, I believe it was April 27, 2016, his speech at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, where he kind of outlined the specifics of it. And I don't have the full document in front of me, but some of the main themes is, there's been a lot of disasters in U.S. foreign policy, and the time has now come to take a new approach, try some different strategies. And he alluded to some of the wars that had unnecessarily been created, particularly Iraq, et cetera. And, some of the relationships which had really gone downhill significantly. And
like which relationships would be under that umbrella?
I think a couple that he particularly highlighted was, or at least in one speech may have meant, one quote in the fairly long speech may have mentioned was, major powers in the P5, permanent five members of the UN Security Council, including China and Russia. And I thought, that made a lot of sense.
And your expertise is really focused in Russia in a sense, right? I mean, I look back at your PhD dissertation and a lot of the work that you've done. You lived in Russia for 3 years. So is it fair to say that among those countries, your particular expertise and relationships that you had bringing in were connected to Russia, or would you say one of the other countries might be where you had more expertise?
I would, it wasn't really relationships. It's just, I think, you alluded to two sides, relationships and expertise.
Yeah.
Yes, I lived in Russia for 3 years, from 2004 to 2007. But, that was, around a decade ago, right? So in the years since, have done a lot in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, across Europe, a little bit in Latin America, and mostly international energy issues related to the United States, where, a lot of the shale technologies and other innovations that U.S. entrepreneurs have been doing, particularly in the energy sector, which had been my main specialty, can be a catalyst for going back to your term reciprocity.
Yeah.
Possibilities for mutual benefit between the United States and others. So,
but to be clear, and I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding, when you pointed out that there were foreign policy ideas that you liked from Trump, and you listed a number of countries there where you have expertise. You mentioned African countries and also Latin America. Trump didn't make bettering relations with African countries and Latin America a significant part of his platform, right? It was really, of the ones you listed, it was really Russia where he was talking about it.
Well, I think he's alluded to, I would encourage you to look back at that Mayflower speech from April 2016, because it gives a good sense of the concepts he was really thinking about and starting to move forward on. And I think it compares and meshes nicely with a lot of the things he has already done in his initial year and a half in office. So I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding, or I should say a significant misunderstanding with an overemphasis on Russia, given the conspiracy theories related to that. But
what would be an
overall,
example, just so our audience understands, when you say like conspiracy theories related to Russia? That's such a term that can be used in so many different ways. What would be like an example conspiracy theory about Russia, at least as it pertains to you, maybe, since I'm only talking to you here, not other people?
Well, sure. Well, I'm happy to talk about it. Look, as I wrote in my letter to then Director of the FBI, Comey, on September 25th, 2016. Let me see. Do I have a copy of this? So as I noted to him, there was this, that you alluded to the dossier, the world premiere of that dossier was launched or shown to the public on September 23rd, 2016. An excerpt from that,
sure,
which alluded to completely ludicrous allegations that the DNC's consultants had come up with, that I had met with the CEO of Rosneft and a senior officer within the Kremlin during my July 2016 trip to Moscow. So as I mentioned to then Director Comey in my first sentence, I said, I wanted to provide you with a few basic facts that should help underscore what a complete waste of time this witch hunt directed at me is. Right? So I think, it really, I don't, I can only speak for myself.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking you to do.
most, most of the people whose names have been involved in this this ongoing saga, I never even spoke with or have met in my entire life.
Well, if we can, let's explore, because our audience might not have everything that you have in front of you or the awareness of all of the details. I mean, just like as an example, when you testified before Congress in November of 2017, you did say you met with Andrei Baranov, who's not the CEO of Rosneft, but he is the head of investor relations, right? That is accurate.
Okay, so look, I mean, what's your favorite sports figure?
My favorite sports figure. I have no idea. I'm not sure what the relevance is of that.
So, let's see, who's the best, who's the top star in the Boston Celtics? If you walk by the TD Garden, the Boston Garden,
sure,
and, talk to someone there, I mean, to say that you are, have some big conspiracy.
Well, but hold on a second, Carter.
That's the owner of the Boston Celtics, et cetera. I mean, I went, so just to be clear, you're alluding to Andrei
No, I'm not alluding.
Baranov,
Let's take
right?
a step back. Hold on, if we can, Carter, because I don't want to get off on the wrong foot with you. I'm not alluding or implying anything. I'm just saying, 5 minutes ago you said it was alleged you met with the CEO of Rosneft, and you said it was ludicrous, it was a witch hunt, et cetera. What I'm saying is, okay, you didn't meet with the CEO, but you didn't walk by on the street. You met with the head of investor relations, Andrei Baranov. True or not true?
There was a big party. We were watching the Euro Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Portugal versus Wales or something like that.
Okay.
Everyone is just so. I stopped by this party that was organized by one of the big U.S. investment banks in Moscow with a ton of people, and yes, I said hello to him there.
Okay.
So it's completely apples and oranges that this crazy conspiracy that this guy is offering. The CEO of this company is offering me an $11 billion bribe.
Well, but hold on, I'm not saying that, right, Carter? So I'm just trying to take it step by step.
That's okay. Let me tell you something. I forget exactly who asked me that question in that testimony. It's been 7,
10
8
months or something.
Since, yeah. But the implication, which that individual asking me that question, it may have been Congressman Schiff, if not, I believe one of the other Democrats on the committee, is that maybe there's some wrongdoing there, or maybe there's some shred of truth in this absolutely ridiculous document known as the Dodgy Dossier.
Fair enough, but so okay. So
as it relates to me, there's not. Yeah.
Sure, fair enough. So okay, you did say hello. Now, you were asked during the same testimony, were sanctions or the privatization of Rosneft brought up during that exchange, as brief as it may have been? And you said that Andrei Baranov may have briefly mentioned it. So that is more than just saying hello. If he maybe briefly mentioned either sanctions or privatizing Rosneft, that's more than just hello, right? So that, again, it doesn't seem is under dispute here.
Okay, David, if I asked you, when you were at the Boston Garden,
yep.
Sitting at, similarly watching a game.
Good.
If you were watching a game there over 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I was. This is a great example. I remember I did this exact thing you're saying. Good.
Okay, so when you were there, and if I'm asking you a full transcript of every conversation you had, in that time when you're sitting there,
yeah, it's
hard to remember. And all I said is I may have, that had briefly talked about this, thing that was in the news, right? Sanctions is a driver of, it's a significant consideration in the economy of Russia. So, it may have briefly come up.
I think the thing that concerns people, Carter, is that we've spent 5 or 6 minutes just on two questions, which are like, did you meet Rosneft's head of investor relations, and might sanctions have been discussed? And it's almost like you think that it is actually a big deal because you're saying so much as opposed to just answering it. And I think this is sometimes in the other interviews that you've done, what I've perceived as making people say, what, these seem like simple questions. Why isn't he just answering them? Because if it was no big deal, it doesn't seem like there needs to be so much elaboration, you know? Maybe I just don't understand it.
No, because there's unfortunately, David, and I haven't had a chance to listen to your show, but I know that a lot of people they like to take a lot of things out of context. So I wanted to make sure,
fair enough,
that you have the full context.
That's fair. I mean, so, I just like to
ask those two little topics you raised are absolutely irrelevant, particularly in comparison to the highly relevant crimes against American democracy that the DNC funded through that, $1 million plus smear campaign, which was totally false as it relates to me.
When it comes to that, when it comes to attacks on American democracy, at this time, speaking only for yourself as Carter Page, the individual, do you believe the consensus of the intelligence community that Russia not only meddled in the 2016 election, but meddled specifically to try to help Donald Trump and defeat Hillary Clinton, or is that a finding that you reject?
I have no evidence to support that. All I know from firsthand experience, and as we've seen through 400 pages of largely redacted information that came out this weekend, the U.S. Intelligence Committee during that time when they were working on those issues, and I was getting attacked by the DNC, there was a lot of government collusion with political operatives, but what I know firsthand through the evidence that I've very much seen and am intimately familiar with is that collusion between the DNC, political operatives, and the U.S. government, their intelligence committee, the same individuals that you're asking me to assess, there was serious collusion, and they did engage in hacking.
But so
I know that
firsthand,
and I think we now have it on the public record from Saturday that they did engage in hacking against myself. So that I'm not an expert in those other topics, David, but I think what we do know is there was definitely hacking against me. So
do you
as a way of getting at the Trump
the
campaign,
findings of the intelligence community that Russia meddled to help Donald Trump? You said you're not an expert in that, but what we have is those are their findings. Do you have a particular reason to disbelieve those findings is my question.
I don't have a reason to disbelieve. I think what I have is, I look back at a track record when the CIA and other U.S. intelligence community assets have, over the course of its history, the 71-year history of the CIA, came up with these false theories that then led to war. So most infamously with the original Dodgy dossier. That's why, when I refer to the Dodgy dossier of 2016, which was used as a way of attacking myself and the Trump campaign.
But I'm not asking about that now.
The reason why I say that is the 2002-2003 Dodgy dossier was also a PR campaign, also from London, which was used to sell the public on a war with Iraq. And all I'm saying is I'm not willing to jump on any theories from the intel community, particularly given the crimes that have been committed against myself and other Trump movement supportors. So we'll have to see. I keep an open mind, but
what would you consider as evidence?
What
would you consider as evidence to say, okay, Russia did meddle to help Donald Trump?
Look, I mean, if there's strong evidence on that, I just haven't seen anything like that. And I think President Trump made a good point in Helsinki about the server, right?
Yes,
I mean, I think it's important that you have to look at the servers, and the fact that they didn't even hand that over and just used similarly DNC funded campaign operatives to make that assessment. I I know what other DNC-funded campaign operatives have done in terms of election interference with the misinformation campaign, but I don't have much insights about that. Yeah.
We're speaking with Carter Page. We'll take a quick break and continue with him right after this. We're continuing our conversation with Carter Page. Carter, I know we have limited time, so there's just a few different things I wanted to touch on and get your thoughts. The government claims you were an agent of a foreign power. Is that a finding that you reject, accept, or aren't sure in terms of how that's being defined?
David, it's a finding that's just absolutely hilarious when I read it. I mean, it's just, if you look at, the elements which they're using to come to that conclusion, some fake news reports. I mean, it's just such a shame for the standards of law enforcement. But again, I think what's nice about what happened on Saturday is that they started taking some steps towards transparency. So hopefully as those 100+ pages of black lines are eventually revealed, we'll understand how that's much clearer.
What I just don't understand about that, and again, this might be my naivete, and if it is, I'm totally open to you explaining it to me. When you say that it's absurd or laughable or a joke or whatever, you were the subject of government surveillance of an American citizen. That requires a very, very high threshold to even be allowed in our justice system. Many of the people reviewing those requests were Republican appointees. So how do you explain that if there's just nothing there, these requests were approved and subsequently approved? How does it happen, or am I just naive and I don't get it?
Well, look, I think, a court is given information, right?
Sure. Right.
And I think it's fairly common, actually, that a court is going to use the information that's provided to it, right?
Sure.
So there's this concept, and I believe it says it directly on the top of that application, but it's ex parte, right? Which means, basically it's one side is giving this information without listening to the other side.
Yeah.
So, I think that's exactly what happened, and I think as we've seen through real hard evidence based on the great work that various committees in Congress have been doing to get to the bottom of this, there was definitely some political motivations and false information that was given to that court. And I don't hold anything against those 4 Republican appointed judges. I have a similar somewhat related case in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. And, my judge was given false information by the U.S. Department of Justice as well. And, I understand the reason why people assume that the U.S. Department of Justice is going to do the right thing, right? Particularly, some judges actually served as assistant U.S. attorneys or other, DOJ positions in their own careers, and it comes with the assumption that people are doing the right thing, right?
But aside
and I think
from that,
I think as we started to see, there's that unfortunately did not occur, and that's the reason why that happened.
Why would they target you with this slanted evidence and concocting a storyline to get a court to go along with it, though, if, as you say, you were this minor volunteer-only guy who never met Trump, never spoke to Trump? Why would they say, let's concoct a case against Carter Page? Why would they do that?
Well, I mean, listen, I don't know whether you caught any of that testimony by one of the FBI's HR professionals from a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But, I think there's a lot of evidence of bias, and so... And
by Republicans, to be clear, by Republicans against you.
No. I'm talking about the quote unquote secret society within the FBI, and people that said, "Let's stop the Trump presidency." That's what I'm referring to. And so I think there was definitely motive and intent And we're still in early days. This is
I agree with that.
early part of a long saga, and we got a little bit of disclosure over the weekend. We'll hopefully get a fair bit more as the rest of these documents get disclosed. But so far, it's looking pretty ugly related to the really illicit intent of some people that are operatives within the U.S. intelligence community. So,
Carter, I know you got to go. Last thing I wanted to ask about, do you believe you will end up indicted as part of this Trump-Russia investigation?
David, I can't even imagine anything that I would be, considered for an indictment for. I mean, I've never done anything wrong. I've been going to Russia for over 25 years. First time, in the closing months of the Soviet era in the summer of '91. Nothing I've ever done in Russia related to Russia was not only, nothing was illegal, nothing was unethical, what I've ever done over there. So
you don't believe you will end up
indicted?
indicted?
Preposterous.
You don't believe you will?
Absolutely not. It's impossible. Yeah.
All right, Carter Page, managing partner of Global Energy Capital. I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I hope you feel that I've been respectful. I've done my best not to interrupt. I don't think I've done any yelling, so I hope that it was the tone was to your liking.
It was nice to talk to you, Dave. It's my pleasure.
Okay, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.